Welcome to the Scholar Chronicles. I'm Dr. Loh KS, a historian of Singapore. And what I do on this podcast is to ask fellow scholars to share their stories when they're doing research, when they're in the field. These stories are often, something that we share, in a cafe or over a beer with other scholars, but we often don't bring them into the forefront, into the public. And I think we should, because these stories often have a bearing on our research. When we find a document, when we find a topic after discussing with another scholar, the excitement that we have, when we have these encounters in the field. So these stories sort of shed light on important questions in scholarship, such as, what is it that motivates scholars to do research? What are the struggles that they have faced and how they have succeeded despite these struggles, and what can scholars do in their social role, right? So the aim of this podcast is to encourage conversations and maybe a little bit of action on the relationship between scholarship and society, so that academic research can have a greater impact on people's lives and social issues. Very pleased to have with us two academics, one of them retired, one of them current, from Malaysia, the country to the north. This is really the second episode of the Scholar Chronicles. The first episode was on social historians working on Singapore, and so very pleased to have two completely different scholars from Malaysia, very close to Singapore, but I think like quite a different world in terms of academia and the research field. So very pleased to have with us Wong Khoon, who's happily retired and sounding, very bright and cheerful today, as well as Heong. It's very hard to pronounce your name actually, so we'll call you Po. Right?
Yes.
Who I know for quite a few years already. You've come to Singapore before, and we've kind of worked together on history of leprosy in Southeast
Yes.
Asia. So just gonna ask you briefly to introduce yourself and tell us, the audience, who you are. So Khoon?
Thank you very much, Dr. Kassim. Yes, I've long retired in nearly decades, as I'm getting near to 77. And as for being bright and cheerful, I think a cup or two of coffee does help. I have taught for many, many years literature, and I started at La Salle Secondary School, where I taught boys in Form 5. And then I went on to teach in University Science Malaysia. But literature for me is not just, a career, something that I can go into to get my bread and butter. Of course, that I can't deny. But it's almost like, without sounding very sacrilegious, a religion of sorts. I think I'll explain later. And as for Kassim's comment that Paul and I seem to be from very different fields, I think I hope to show later that there is a traversing of boundaries, that even in literature, you can work together with social scientists. You can work together with a number of people from other disciplines. I think I will hope to show that later.
Wonderful. Paul?
Hi. Good morning, everyone. I'm Paul. I'm currently based in Penang. One similarity that I share with Khoon is I'm also working in USM, even though she's already retired, but I'm currently working with USM, and I'm a social scientist. And I like the idea of what Khoon just mentioned about traversing the boundaries of discipline. Which is something I've been doing as well, even though I'm a social scientist. And in social science, people tend to box themselves into, you are from this discipline, you are from that discipline. But then for me, to do a good research, it really calls for crossing the boundary of disciplines. I've also borrowed a lot of ideas from literary theories when I'm doing my own research. Even though in the situation of our university, literary studies is completely in a different school. from where I'm affiliated with currently. Yeah.
Mm. Right. It's great to have this start to where we see that we share certain common values and approaches. I think what we want to do today, right, is to kind of get a sense of the state of the humanities and the social sciences in the Malaysian context, and try to draw those stories, those experiences that you have, trying to make it work, right? Trying to teach and trying to research about literature, about a post case, I think, political science and post colonial theory in Malaysia, and in terms of thinking about being a public intellectual as well as a scholar in the Malaysian context. And both of you, I really admire what you've been doing, what you've done in that sense as well. So maybe it was very interesting, So Khoon, to hear that you were a school teacher, a literature teacher before you joined academia. Could you talk about that and, what prompted you? Was there a moment or incident that prompted you? Did you learn anything from being a teacher that said, I want to go further and do a PhD in literature?
I think when you teach in secondary school, you are meeting with a variety of people. And I happened to be teaching a class of boys who were almost termed as irredeemable by the then headmaster. It was a Catholic school. It was brother somebody, I won't name him. But I think what was interesting is that teaching them English, and they didn't do literature, the parts of the poems that they were able to really feel, the boys were wonderful basketballers and they were wonderful footballers. They were seen as not very word alert, but literature has to do with words. It has to do with what, I'm going to be long-winded about what Shakespeare says, words, and also what Wordsworth says, words give you reflections too deep for tears. And these basketballers and these athletes, these boys in the worst class, I saw that they were able to feel, they were able to empathize. It's just that they needed some time. And I gave extra lessons in the afternoon. So the brother was very appreciative of it, you see. But it then propelled me onwards to say that I want to study this subject deeper. I want to really know it. I already had a BA, but I want to know more. So I was doing my master's while I was teaching. And Prof. Lloyd Fernando was a wonderful mentor, knowledgeable and wonderful. And he was also spreading out literature into what is called the post-colonial scenario. This post-colonial theory thingy, this new thing, actually has been there. It has been there with writers from the Caribbean, like Wilson Harris. Sorry, I'm going to drop a few names. They have been already deconstructing the colonial unitary narrative of hegemonic control. But today, of course, it's all formalized by all its subalterns. But coming back to it, that's why I wanted to go in. And Lloyd was a wonderful supervisor. He managed to spread literature to new literatures in English from the Caribbean, from Africa, from various ex-colonies. And that was wonderful. So, but coming to your point about advice to young academics, I think it is very important, if you want to do literature, that you must have a love of words and reading. You must have an ability to withstand long hours of solitary monastic reflection. Whether you like it or not, you have to do that. You don't have that many opportunities for fieldwork. Not that they're not there, I'll tell you why later. They're there too, but you have to be able to want to be reflective. You have to meditate and think. You have to go back to the old monastic tradition. But having said that, it doesn't mean that you can't be an Asian or even world public intellectual, because you can go out and do research in schools. See what are the shortcomings in the curriculum. In fact, I was in the Malaysian Literature Curriculum Board for many years, and Dr. Zawia, who has passed away, was chairing it. And we all tried to bring things to a point where we are trying to ask questions about the unitary narrative of nation, which the politicians will all want one narrative. So there is a possibility of marrying the two. But to marry the two, public intellectual work and your own love of the subject, you still must have a love of the subject first. You still must have, you see, that's why I don't want to throw out the close analysis of words just because I want to do feminist theory, I want to do post-colonial theory, I want to do post-structuralism, I want to do all the kinds of things that are famous. Don't forget the old thinkers, Gramsci, Foucault, they were just reflecting philosophically that we grab on them when we do our post-colonial theories, our gender theories, Gramsci and all this, we were packed in. It's not their fault. They thought meditatively. We grab onto what they have, the bits and pieces, and form our own theory. So the final line is love your subject. Go into it, think deeply, then apply whatever theory you have to get published and to get promotions. That is my advice.
Tell us about this love of words and what do you say? Love of words and readings, right? And texts, right?
Yes.
And
You
do
see,
all these theories, right? Do they actually enhance this love or do they
Yeah.
detract from it?
now I'm going to do some self-promotion. I think Beng Lan wouldn't want me to promote that. You know this book that Beng Lan
Oh,
edited years ago?
right.
I have an essay in it that I think explains quite clearly my own journey as a literary scholar. I wouldn't even use scholar, just a person who likes literature. I'm quite tired of the word scholar and whatever you have, professor or whatever else, because I think it's just the love of the word. Now, what is it that makes you love words? I think quite often it is because I didn't have a knowledge of Chinese that I'm sure if you know Chinese, and now I'm trying to learn it, there are many beautiful words because a word can give you various reverberations. It can give you the negative side, the dark side of the moon, but it can also give you the bright side. But more than that, it can give you the mix. I think it is what Wordsworth says about thoughts too deep for tears. Now, does that help anybody? I don't know. Because it is the sense that when you read a line, if the structure is very good, and it doesn't have to be very long, look at Bertrand Russell, his sentences are very short. It is that ability to capture it. Or look at our Chinese Si Gui, I don't know how to say it in Mandarin, Si Gui. Now I'm learning the 4-line quatrains of the Chinese. Fantastic. Yeah, the objects that are ordinary in our blood, that's how language works. An ordinary object, a daffodil. Just daffodil, lila, come out in the spring, yellow color. But it gives you thoughts too deep for tears.
When do you think you discovered this love? Was it in school?
Yes. I think it's also partly because of family background. And I think whether we like it, we're all affected by family background. Whether we live in Bukit Hosui or where I live, because you know why? Our family was very cash-strapped. So when you get a book, not like today, entitlement, Dad, buy me 500 books online, and they will buy or something. When you get a book, when you're in a very cash-strapped family, you just value it and read it. And that love comes from the fact that the item is precious. Today, can you get anybody to read? Even IT books. After one, I have a student today, after 2 paragraphs, she tells me, it's wrong. I can't read any more than 2 paragraphs. Half an hour is enough for me. So there is that sense of, now, does that help anyone? Does it mean that the people who are well-off do not read? No, I do have many students who read too. I think it's just that sense that people must be allowing themselves time, not instant coffee, instant Indomie, please.
I think reading is really a slow process, and which today's, with all this communication technology, people are just so impatient, getting more and more impatient, especially
young people.
Young people, like in things like reading. Yeah, they just cannot bear the slowness of reading, that you are trying to enjoy every word, that especially literary works, which is
Yeah. When I was a kid, I love reading as well. I could only buy one book a year. That was on my birthday, so I would stay 1 hour in the bookstore trying to find that book. That was how it was. But I mean,
Yeah.
I kind of get what you mean by, you know, the lack of reading today. I do think the culture of reading has changed, but there is still a culture of reading, and maybe we can think about later on, right, how we can draw upon it to encourage young people to read. Um, I'm going to put you aside for a while and go
Ah,
to Paul.
yes, please.
Tell us. So, I was trying to. I mean, I know you for quite a number of years, right? But I never really know what was your background.
Mm.
So it seems that from your PhD, it was in Pol Science,
Yes.
and your work is post-colonial studies,
Yes.
generally speaking. Is that
Yes.
right? How did you get into this?
Yeah, I know that even today it seems it looks appears like a very weird combination for a person who are in the department of the section of political science doing things like post-colonial studies. But my trajectory is really I don't know, quite a I don't know how to put it. You know, I my bachelor degree was actually in physiotherapy. So
Mm.
and I had a 1 year clinical internship, and I studied in Taiwan. So and then the 1 year clinical internship really prompted me to think a lot about the nature of the job. I didn't really enjoy clinical job because I have to admit, to do a clinical job, you have to really be able to handle a lot of things, multiple things, not just the clinical things, including the emotions of not just your coworkers, but the patients. People come into hospital on the worst time of, the worst day of their life. Or, they come in usually for physiotherapies. We have to handle people who are paralyzed, and there are a lot of sufferings that I noticed, and I think I was too young to handle that back then, and I thought that I want to keep a distance from it, and to learn more about how actually can medical personnel handle that better, which was not taught during my training as a physiotherapist, because all the trainings were really very technical, like the physiology and anatomy, all these very or even the skills of treating patients, and so I didn't really enjoy the clinical job. And but and during my high school time, I was really interested in reading, in watching movies, so things that are quite close to literature. But the school system in Malaysia, I think it had something to do with in 1990s, Malaysia was going on to this uh, developmentalist road, and I think the government was encouraging more people to take up science, engineering, like that. And even though I did very good in my SRP in Form 3, and then those with good results, they were discouraged to move into literary studies. They were actually forced to do science stream. So that's how I ended up in science stream. And then I did very bad. I ended up, my result was really bad. And but then yeah, so that's how I ended up becoming taking up physiotherapy, but didn't really practice it except for the 1 year clinical internship. And then after that, in my master degree, I completely shifted to social science. Yeah, that's how that's my trajectory lah. But then another thing I think that really shaped my scholarship is those years I spent in Taiwan. It was in the mid 1990s until 2001. So over the 7 years period, it was a period where Taiwan really underwent a lot of transformation, including they they started to have election to choose their own president, and started to choose their own mayor of Taipei City. Oh, so I would call this like democratization. So a lot of social movements back then. All these things really shaped me. And how it shaped me? I think it shaped me that I needed to look at things from below, not from above, because before the democratization, in Taiwan, it was under the rule of a very authoritarian nationalist party. And today, after the democratization, we can see that they have come up with a lot of oral histories of those who were imprisoned or even executed. You know, their family members came up to talk about finally, you know, see the light, that they have a chance to share the stories of their parents or grandparents who were imprisoned or killed during the White Terror time. And this is something that I think very important for me, and shapes my perspective in doing social science. And I refuse to see myself as just a political scientist, because what I've been doing has been traversing this disciplinary boundary, and I don't see myself. I see myself more as a social scientist than a political scientist, which is wider, so much wider than the narrow perspective of just social science, of just political science. Yeah.
Yeah, that is really, really interesting. You know, we often don't talk about enough about the context that we live in that influenced us before we, you know, go into academia. And I think we should talk a lot about that, because that is something that connects academics, actually, right? You talk about generations of academics and where they come from, right? So Khoon, maybe I can ask you, so you were talking about this excitement, right, of this discovering words and texts. When was it? Was this in the early 70s that you started in academia?
I think I started teaching in USM in 1978 after some years of teaching in secondary school. But I think what Paul has said just now has also motivated me to talk a little bit about context, because so far I've talked about the love of words. And it seems very much as if that is so divorced from public issues, political agency, constituencies. The reason why I didn't elaborate on it is that I thought the essay would tell you everything on this essay. But then again, the thing that is important is more for me to highlight one thing that really worked on my mind and made me feel that I have to move from just literary analysis to something called critical literacy or cultural politics. Now they're very famous terms. Now everybody's using critical literacy and then all that. That was Operation Lalang. I think that Operation Lalang happened just after I returned from Berkeley. And Berkeley did me some good, because I was quite a lot of we call it F.R. Lewis. F.R. Lewis is this famous canonical English critic who says that you look at the beauty of the word, all that, which is fine. But then when I went to Berkeley, we had Dipesh Chakrabarty who was there. We had all of these like David Lloyd who was there, Lisa Lowe, who were all doing what is called discourse analysis of sorts. Actually, Bakhtin has done that too. But what was important was that Berkeley has a whole multicultural setup and various discourses, Chicano, this and that. So I told myself, you better read more than just literary theory or the great canonical works. So when I came back, it happened that Operation Lalang started. And I remember it was Dr. Mustafa Anwar, who told me, told me about Aliran. And Chandra Mustafa was taken in during the Operation Lalang. And it was that time that I decided to join the Aliran and get together with the others to write letters of appeal for Chandra. So Operation Lalang is one of the most brutalizing moments in Malaysian history. That's what I put in my essay. And with that, the citizen subject has to rethink her identities in flux. It means that the nation-building narrative of identity has to be somehow renegotiated, interrogated by looking at fragmentation, hybridity. So who was I? I am a Malaysian fourth generation, a migrant. I am now living in a country of multiracial proclivities. There are various races. So how do I place myself? I'm a woman, so gender is also important. So all of these multiple subjectivities became important when I look at literary analysis. But I'm also very concerned about forgetting the beauty of the text. It was this great feminist scholar, Caroline Hellbrun, who says that she's quite tired of theories that will obfuscate and sort of overshadow the beauty of the text, so that you only get a lot of theories and you don't get to feel the dilemma of the human being in the text, the human being portrayed, the characters. I don't want that. I want the theory to be able to complement and to sort of enhance the beauty of the text, if that can be done. It's very difficult. If you read somebody like, who's that lady, the famous Indian lady who's doing subalterns all the time, the lady with the gray hair like myself, what's her name? My goodness, don't tell me I'm forgetting names.
Gayatri Spivak.
Gayatri. She's done a lot. It's wonderful. A lot of things that she's done are groundbreaking. But I cannot sustain reading too much of her work because I want to go back to the text. I want to go back to the Indian lady's document. She uses an Indian subaltern lady to talk about the theories. That's wonderful. But what did the lady say? What were her words? And here is where Paul's oral histories come in.
Yeah, I was thinking about that. Yeah.
What did she say? Did she even expect that what she said would be theorized? And how would it be theorized? And how would it help us? That was always in my mind.
That was something
I met Deepesh in Berkeley. And Deepesh is a very nice person, very open. And we shared a lot. And he also admitted that sometimes you do have to go back to the to the so-called ground level. Yeah. That's how I feel. Frankly, I'll be very honest. Too many theories are too dry for me to read, especially now that I'm in retirement. I just want to read about, if I could read Chinese, I would read the war diaries or the emergency diaries of women during our emergency. But I can't read Chinese. So I'll have to wait for people to transliterate or to see them. But then I can hear the voice. Yeah.
Paul, do you have any response to what Khoon was saying?
Yes, talking about how this theory obfuscate the real living experience of human being, the dilemmas that they are experiencing. This is something sometimes I think the so-called injustices of theoretical writing or academic writing done on ordinary people's life, for the sake of theorizing and conceptualizing. Sometimes I find that is the limitation of academic writing, and it can be as exciting and also as boring as it can be when you're trying to reducing people's life into a few theories and concepts, which is really unfair and injustices to people's full stories, their experience. And this is something that I really learned a lot when I was doing the oral history of the May 13 survivors and their family members. It really took me a long time to think about how to present their stories. So presenting the stories of people that we interview, whether for personal interest or for academic, the purpose of academic research, I think it's very challenging to think about how to present and represent these people's stories. And then, but for the May 13 book, after a long time of reflection, I thought that it would be good to present their stories in full version. And then another challenge that I came across is actually whether to present them as a third person story or as a first person voice. Because I have a group, so we were discussing a lot on that. And then we actually test two different types of writing. One is to write in their first person voice. The other one is to present their stories as a third person. Like we are talking about what they were doing rather than they are talking about themselves, what they were seeing, what they were experiencing, what they were feeling, and things like that. So it ended up that the first person voice is so much more, how to put it? Perhaps Khoon, as a reader, it is so much more powerful than presented as a third person kind of story. So it is really very powerful and it touches people a lot because it is their voices. And talking about voices, sometimes I don't really like it when scholars or academics or even activists, they talk about giving voice to people. People already have the voice. You are just creating a platform for them to tell their stories rather than giving them voice. I think the this saying that you're giving voice to people to me it sounds really condescending because people already have the voice. And then through their stories, through their voices, you see um, the dilemma that we are facing in every day, as a human being, especially during challenging moment like whether it was May 13 or whatever other, historical episodes. Yeah.
Is this the book? Is this the article in Jumbra's The Family Narratives and Abandoned Monuments?
No, I have a different book called Life After.
Life After.
It's a collection of oral histories
What year?
of people.
What year is that?
It was published in
I've come across that book. Yeah, I've seen. Yeah, it is. Yeah, I've seen that book. Yeah.
So maybe can you elaborate, like, so in this book, right? How did you present the stories as they are in the first person? How did you write about these stories?
Yeah, the stories were presented in a first person voice. And it was meant to be an oral history, but then we also face challenges of doing oral history because conventionally, ideally, oral history should be recorded. But then for this project, we were strangers to those people we wanted to meet and interview. So some of them, they don't feel comfortable to open up if we on the recorder. So they chose, as a compromise, we have to just off the recorder and then listen to them and then record as detailed as possible and then get back to them later to ask them, are there any things that we got it wrong or whatever? But then the stories are written in a first person voice. That's something that we did. And also I think for presenting stories like oral histories, there are a lot more other challenges. For example, we are, especially when we are textualizing the interview, we turn them into text, transcribe them, turn them into text. We are removing a lot of things like their emotions, their nonverbal expressions, even their colloquial expression. We can still capture it, but we cannot capture, for example, their the emotions and even accent. Their dialect. Dialect can be very a lively expression of a person's identity. But this will be removed once you textualize it, and it also becomes objectified as well when you are textualizing a person's life story. Then it becomes something that they can refer to after this, especially after the book is published. So people are like, okay, I don't want to share my stories again. Perhaps you can just refer to the book. And this is something that I don't know whether it is good or bad. Perhaps Kasim can also share a little bit.
Yeah, I do.
Research,
I have some thoughts, but I think Khoon has something to say, right?
I just feel that I'm so delighted to hear Paul because there is a certain sense of conscience and honesty which we need among our young academics. I know how difficult it is to try to have this kind of conscientizing, to remind yourself, and then also to think of how one can get promoted and how one can get a long CV. So it is a struggle. What Paul has raised, I think, are very difficult dilemmas. And I also don't want people to be so caught up that they cannot do any work. So I think the objectifying of the subjects that you interview because you are turning them into a text is not a total loss. The text itself will still remain to give others who do not know anything about them some insight. And as for the fact that you cannot capture all the emotions, the dialectical variants, that is something that I think you can't do much about.
Yeah.
Yeah, because you ask yourself the other question, which is that without any record of them at all, in any language, they will just disappear in the mist of history. So you are doing something good. I years ago, Dr. Molly Lee and Dr. Lien Hing, did a book on women who were abused called When the Butterfly Flaps Its Wings. It was put into a book, first person narrative, and I reviewed it. I can't remember where I reviewed it, but if you want to, I can show you the article. But the book, I don't know whether it's still available. They also came up with this dilemma because you're talking about abused women. You want to show the emotion, you want to have that kind of honesty, but what to do? So they did it as a kind of first person thing. And of course, they also had difficulty with people not wanting things to be recorded because some of them were still living with their abusers, as it were. So all of these things will come in, but I don't think they are so sort of like a conundrum that cannot be solved. I mean, just do the best you can, and always reassure yourself that you still have this record. You still have done this record. It's still an honor to them. It's still a contribution. This book, you know, we can, I don't know if you can get it called When the Butterfly Flaps Its Wing. I don't know whether Garab Budaya Bookshop has it in
Are
PDF.
those two editors academics?
Yes.
Yeah,
Okay.
USM.
They have been scholars for many years. Molly Molly and Lenny have both been scholars in this field for a long time, but activists too. Yeah, working for
Right.
women's causes.
Sounds like a wonderful
Maybe
book.
I can always make a copy for Paul. One day I'll be able to see her, so I'll make her.
Thank you.
Copy.
Yeah.
Or I can even give it to you because now my books I'm giving to Tom, Dick, Harry, and Joe. Anybody who wants it, they can have it.
I'm happy to have it. I'm happy to inherit.
I have given 350 books away already, and now I still have some. Yeah. Now I don't want to keep all of this because I'm decluttering. But yes, we still have those. There's this sense of, it's very gratifying to see young academics who are very concerned about how they should do their work, right? I think that is very good. Both of you are good examples. Of course, we all want to earn acknowledgement. We all want to earn, what can I say? Money. If I want to be graphic about it, money. Who doesn't want money? I mean, a gaji. Everybody wants to have bread and butter. I mean, on the table, you know.
Yeah.
Let me turn that point to Paul, right? Do you think you are typical or you are a minority among young Malaysian academics who have this social conscience?
I wouldn't call myself like praise, like it sounds like self-praising, self-conscious, but I think I am a minority in the sense that I don't restrict myself to just getting published in index journals or just for the sake of getting KPI. For example, the book, this book called Life After, I never list it down for my CV because for me, that book is something that I want to dedicate it to those who accepted my interviews. Even though I did have one journal article in Jambras, or some of the interviews came from that oral history interview. But then that was the only article, and I did that because back then, like what Khoon just said, you know, as a junior academic back then, I was struggling to get to secure a better job, and I need publication. And then I was really juggling between a lot of different things, and there are different expectations of a scholar as well. You know, the university want you to do so many things, and then the society expect you to do so many things, and so on and so forth. And then so it's really very challenging to meet different expectations, and I just tried my best. Yeah. So yeah, that's the struggle that I went through when doing that project. It was actually unfunded, and I tried to do it like, you know, get as many volunteers as possible, and also to kind of like share the spirit of doing an unfunded project. And we were hoping that with this book, then once we are also lucky that we get the help of Garab Budaya, who Pak Chong was willing to publish that book. And then we're also thinking about, you know, this book is very important for Malaysia. We need to publish it in multiple languages. But where do we have no funding at all? So where do we get the money from? So we were thinking of, you know, just come up with one language first, and then through the sales of the first book, and then we go and support the translation, so on and so forth. So we are now in the process of publishing it in Bahasa, in Malay language. And it is a very long process, but I think we all learn something in trying to work with people who are actually younger than me, but then we all learn together. Even though they are younger, they have a lot of ideas. For example, the experiment that we did, trying different versions, same story but written in different kind of like voices, the first person narrative and the third person narrative, and to see the difference.
So essentially, Paul, you did two projects, basically, instead of one, right? You did the academic version, and then you did the kind of more social version, more for the public audience, in that sense.
Yes,
right.
You can say that, but it's actually the same project. It's just that I using the materials for academic publication and the same material, and then publishing for public readership.
Correct, but that means you need, in terms of time, in terms of resources, energy, you need to split it up, right? You need to make it additional. So when you were doing the book, right, the non-academic project, how did you adjust, or modify the material so that they would speak to a public audience better?
That goes back to the idea of let the interlocutor speak for themselves. So they were speaking in their first person narrative, rather than me as an academic cutting their stories down, like, quoting them and then to fit in some theories, or to strengthen my so-called argument, quoting here and there, cutting their stories down. No, for this book, every interlocutor, their stories are presented in as what they have told us. But then in first person narrative rather than third person, because some oral history, they are presented in a third person narrative, but we choose to present the stories in a first person narrative. And that will be very different from academic writing, because in academic writings, your interlocutor's stories never get to be presented in its entirety. It's always cut down in a small paragraph. But then in this book, their stories are told entirely in what they have told me.
And because it's a non-academic book, it's a book for the general reader, the kind of matrices, the kind of evaluation, you're no longer looking at how many citations you have, how many pats on the back from fellow academics. How has the response been? Do you know any sense of how people have engaged with your book?
Judging from what I can see on social media, I think people are reading it, and but then it is also not easy to read, not because it is not academic writing. So it is difficult, not in that sense. It is difficult because of the strong emotions that is passed on through the stories, the things that people, all the encounters that people went through during that episode, and it was very intense because people are talking about their loss. People are talking about how they cope with the loss, how they cope with the fear they encounter during the riots. So these are the difficult part of the book. And talking about difficult stories, so we also try to, in terms of the design, the layout design of the book, we have taken that into consideration as well. We know that it's going to be very difficult to read. So the spacing, and also every story is inserted with what do you call that? These sketches of one thing that derived from the story. Let's say the story talks about a cinema in KL, so we'll get someone to do an illustration, sketch that cinema out, or maybe someone mention about something that is important to the person who passed away during the riot, then we get someone to draw that thing, to do a sketches of that thing, and then insert in that story, so that when the reader read, they have space to breathe, because it's going to be very difficult. Yeah.
You do have the book on e-form, right? PDF, right? Could you like show us?
No, I don't have it because of Pak Chong.
He didn't give it to
there's-
you.
He did,
you-
but then I didn't share because for copyright issue. And then once the e-copy is circulated, then it will be difficult for Pak Chong to sell the book.
No, but you do have the kind of the pre-publication final print, right?
Yes.
Yeah, you can show that. You can circulate that actually. You can share that. You don't share the ebook itself. Yeah. No, I just ask you about it because it'll be nice to be able to see what you just described.
Oh, I can show you here. You
can
one
share
moment.
it. Yeah.
Yeah, we can see it. Yeah, no problem. We will be happy to see it.
So this is the book.
All
and we
right.
get
Yeah.
a very
I've
famous
seen it at
artist.
Gerak Budaya, yeah.
Yeah.
Well, people do look at it. When I was there for Kejin, launch of Kejin's Francis book on Kejin, people do look at it. I've seen people looking at it. Yeah.
And this book cover is designed by Sharon Chin. She's a very talented artist, and it's very meaningful because it is stitching. So it's like stitching the wound of the country, of the nation. Yeah.
Very good indeed.
Patchwork. Yeah. And so let me show you, like, for example, here you see a camera.
Yeah.
So because the interlocutor talk about camera, and then so we get someone to do a sketch of a camera, and or this one, a boy selling nasi lemak.
Very well done. Very well done.
Yeah. So this is how the idea of the idea didn't come from me. It's from another friend. So you can say this is actually a collective work. So that's why I never claim that this is Paul's work. No, because for me this is really a collective work.
Where is the author? Is there an author cited?
No author.
No author.
Purposely. Yeah, no author. It only says the oral histories of the May 13th incident, and no author.
All right.
But at the back, we do have the members of the group who did collected.
Yeah. You have to give them that acknowledgement at the back because of the work done.
Yeah.
I think we should also add that May 13th is, of course, one of the explosive moments
brutalizing moments.
Yeah,
one of the most brutalizing moments.
And so, great that you have done oral history on this. Deserve a lot of credit for it. So Khoon, I want to kind of go back, right, to the 70s. I'm very interested in the 70s. And you have talked about your kind of more measured, right, view of literary theory today. But in the 70s, right, did you encounter something called the New Left? And what was your idea of the New Left at the time?
New Left. I'm afraid that I'm not very clear about the definition of that. Unless you can give me a few names. Yeah, because it's never very clear.
The New Left as opposed to the Old Left, right? The Old Left was about class. The New Left is to divide that up into the different categories, the new categories. Gender.
I'm not very sure that I can say that much about them, but all I can say is that, when you talk about leftist movements, they can always morph into different things, fragmentation lah, this lah, that lah, or intra-left conflict lah. So for me, I mean, because I'm not a social scientist, and I go back to the old thinkers like Bakhtin and all of these chaps. So when you look at all of these titles like New Left, Old Left, or whatever left, I just, frankly, I'm not that much help here, Kasing, because why? I don't even pursue them or follow them. I know there's fragmentation within all of these areas where people are leftists or whatever. There will always be fragmentation depending on which part of social life or economic life they want to foreground and which group they want to speak for. And I will be very honest. To me, all of these left, new center, new left, right, center, or whatever you call them, they are all ideologically somehow owing allegiance to something, to funding, if you don't mind my saying so. How to start an organization and say, I say I'm the New Left, founder or somebody, I have a group, I want to write something, I want to propagate something, I want to do that. Where am I going to get the funding? I know this sounds very cynical, and I don't want to be cynical. I'm not saying they have no function at all. They have their function, but they don't fascinate me, Kasi. Not a bit. No fascination at all.
No fascination. Not even then. Not even then.
Not even then. But then what worked for me was that I had not read all of these guys, like Gramsci, I never read them, Bhakti, I never read all these old guys, I never read. It was going to the canteen, the social science canteen, meeting with the late Ho K Jin. Well, he won't care, he will just blast you, but he's a very kind person. Then Masna and Johan and all of these people. So we did work together. Masna and I did work together, and we all sort of like, I was actually more gravitating towards these social scientists than my own group of literature people in USM who were not really that, what can I say? They don't want to question anything. They don't want to question anything. So I did feel that there is a need for what is called critical literacy, which is why we try to introduce that into the examination curriculum as well as questions. But even then, we have to get, what is a critical literacy? It's just being able to see that you cannot take away from power and ideology when you look at a text. You can't. You can't take away from positionality, which is also very important for, I think, when we do oral histories, when we interview people, we have to explain as simple as we can our position to the person we are interviewing, even the shopkeeper or the guy on the street. Meaning what? Who are we? We are not the guy who is the friend of the guy, sitting there buying kway teow. We are actually an academic. We have got this kind of training. Don't think that the guy who's you're interviewing won't know, if you explain to him, you tell him who you are. That means you make clear your positionality. So that is what I learned also from the social scientists that we talk with. And Cajun will tell me things like, who are you? You make clear to people before you make all this assumption you're speaking for them. Like that. Okay, so that's clear. So critical literacy is this ability to say that I'm going to be honest about myself. I'm going to tell you who I have this power, I have this power, I have this power. I have this power to write about you. Okay? And soon it might be published in a book for public consumption. And one article will be not for public consumption. You think that the guy will not understand if you tell him the brass, but just tell him, you go high scholarly you are. Then the guy will say, okay. He might be very delighted, or he might say, can't control that. So that was interesting to me. And finally, when I went to Philippines for the Asian Public Intellectual, I taught in two schools. One was a very middle class school. So I got to tell them who I am, why I'm there. And then one was really not very, sort of like, I wouldn't say like in one of the less sort of middle class areas. And you see the difference between the students. I wouldn't say that one group of students is brighter than the other, but when you teach the richer ones, you have to also give them certain sense of who you are and what you are, and also draw out from them certain things. And literature is wonderful for drawing out. You know why? E.M. Forster, the wonderful British novelist, tells us that all human beings are like an iceberg. I'm telling my students today even. 1/3 only you can see, which is the public self, the doctor so and so, the very, very collected fellow. That's 1/3 of the iceberg. The 2/3 underneath are our doubts, our greed, our drive for power, our jealousy, our competitiveness, our wanting to stab each other in academia. That's all underneath, or whatever you want to do. So what do we do when we teach? We should be quite frank. We should be saying that we are also like showing you only 1/3, telling the students. The other 2/3 is just us, human, with all the culpabilities, the vulnerabilities, the 7 deadly sins, if you want to use the Christian analogy. I find that it works even today with my A-level students that I do teaching with. I still teach A-level. And they will say, like that. They will be more honest with themselves when you tell them that you also have all of this. Most of us don't dare. I can do it because I'm retired and I'm already, I don't care what they think about me. I say, I have this, I have envy of this. or that. Most of us don't want to, because the student may say, oh, you're like, huh? But time, I'm not saying that that's easy to do. I'm sure when I was young, I wouldn't want to do that. I want to appear quite collected. The hidden 2/3 of the iceberg. I have to tell them this, because when they analyze a writer, writers do not just tell you how the fellow looks, how he dresses. The writer will also show you through dialogue, through what is called interior monologue, their thoughts, their feelings. This is what I like about literature. You can't hide from a writer. The writer is like God, he created you. So all your innermost recesses, whatever you're trying to hide, the nooks and corners, he knows. So that is what is fascinating about literature. Really fascinating. And therapeutic, it's therapy. I call it therapy. Literature is therapy. Literature is religion, and now I say literature is therapy. But I've never said that literature is money making. So the young then will say, hey, how to get money from literature? You still can do a good job, work well, get published, get fellowships. If you do a good job, people will give you fellowships, literature or otherwise.
I have to tell you a secret, Khoon. In Singapore, right, in the schools, when you're in the art stream, 90% of the students would take English literature, right? And maybe 5% would take, Chinese literature.
Oh, okay.
I'm one of those few who never did English literature, although I was an art student. Never did any literature.
Yes. You didn't take Chinese literature also?
Never. My Chinese is so terrible. And that's because I had the chance to do both, right, at the secondary level and at the JC level. But when I look at Macbeth, I look at Shakespeare, the language just turns me off completely, and it's also, I think that there is a social kind of cultural element there, that if you do English literature, you belong to a certain group of people. Right, your family is English educated, middle class, which I was not. Right, my parents didn't know English.
I understand.
And
Yes.
although I love reading, right, I love to read books, but reading Shakespeare, reading those English novelists seemed like a different world for me that I didn't want to explore. I wanted to explore history, which is a different world in a different way, right?
And
So
localized. Very localized, and you can see local resonances,
right.
Not the colonial resonance.
So it's a thing about the language, and it's also a thing about the world that they are trying to introduce to you. I mean, no doubt, right? I believe now that humanities is very important, and literature is one of the great humanities. It teaches us so much about ourselves, right? About the human self, about human condition. So the question I have for you is, do you think that literature can kind of democratize in a way, so that in terms of the text that we select, that we can get more people to read literature and to be interested in literature?
You've got a very good point, and I don't deny it. That, don't forget, at 76, sorry to go with my 77 almost, I do have this colonial overlay. Because don't forget, I was taught by Anglican missionaries when I was in St. Mary's. And then when I went to University Malaya, it was at a point where there was still a lot of expat lecturers. But I'm one of those people, the post-colonial, or maybe not so post, maybe one foot there and one foot. I feel that when you love canonical works like Shakespeare or Virginia Woolf or even Henry James or even Chaucer, it doesn't mean that you're uncritical about the British and their colonizing power. So how do you democratize literature? You mustn't just be teaching the canonical works. You must introduce into. There's one writer I love, but he's very hard to read. But never mind, you can try him.
Even harder to read, is it?
Wilson Harris.
Wilson Harris.
Ilsonharris. Wilson Harris, the Caribbean, Guyana. I'm from Guyana. His English is superb, of course. What he does is, if you teach it well to your students, he treats the literary, the historical legacies of Guyana, colonized for so many centuries by first the Spaniards, then other Europeans, conquistadores, they call them. And he turns it he has something called the Guyanese Quartet, 4 novels, into a relooking at the past, where he makes the colonialist himself trapped by his own colonial system. We have forgotten. In literature, we do have, for example, George Orwell. If you read his Burmese Days, where he very openly talked about a colonial officer who didn't even know what to do. Here he was a very powerful agent of colonialism, but I can tell the student, what did Orwell say? Mumble, mumble, the student looks and says, he very powerful lah. He can kill the elephant lah. The elephant in the marketplace, man, he will kill. Then I said, did you read the book? He had a long 5 paragraphs where he said he can't kill the elephant. He didn't know what to do. He was just so shocked because suddenly he was called and he's the only one who has the power to shoot the elephant lah, and only one with a rifle probably. Or with his, he just can't, because there's a symbol of this being the elephant in the room, he doesn't even know what to do. So, you see, not all colonial officers are totally without heart and conscience. So, when you teach your student, you teach them the dilemma of being a conquistadors. And one more point, in Wilson Harris, what I like is he gets away from binaries. We are famous for binaries, grey, white, rich, all very bad. Local people all very good. He doesn't. He shows that the local people colluded. He shows that even the conquistadores, the powerful ones, there were some very kind ones. So the self and other, when you're binaries, the self and other. And always the self is very big, with a big S. The other is very small, with the O, small O. It's hierarchical. I like writers like Wilson Harris for democratizing the process of colonialism, showing it to be much more complex than we saw it as black and white, and thinking we are all very wonderful. That before the colonialist came, we were all in paradise. Do you know that when Chinua Achebe wrote Things Fall Apart, he was honest enough to show that in Igbo society, before the West even knew there was an Igbo society, fighting already. Every warrior wanted to be the Igbo chief. So power nexus is very important among all societies. But someone can fault me and say, "Oi, like that, then you're excusing the colonialists lah." So where is agency? I think agency comes from the recognition of power in all its manifestations. Whether it is the colonialists or our own society, whether it's our own ethnic Chinese group or any other group, it is still power. So we begin to fight for democratization, not targeting only one group. If not, very bodoh lah, black and white lah. Power is so diffuse, and that is what I like Wilson Harris. Very hard to read. The book is very, very hard to read because it's only very thin. But it's so powerful. The words are so powerful because you can have an Arawak Indian woman, the Arawak Indians, the indigenous of Guyana. Suddenly she metamorphosed into a Spanish woman. It's called magic reality, right? Magic realism, which is what all the Latin American writers do. And very good go on to read because no logic. They're saying literature does not base on logic only. So the two coming together is actually Wilson Harris' way of saying, hey, power is diffuse, no black and white. Shakespeare, how can you say you don't like him? But don't worry. My brother told me, please, at least don't say anything. Please don't give us your soliloquies of Shakespeare Tolo. Time and time, tomorrow and tomorrow and tomorrow, just please don't. But you see, the beauty of that is that you forgot. Shakespeare also from a lower class. He also had to struggle and fight very hard. And then Elizabeth I said, this one is quite good. He was poverty-stricken. So you must read Macbeth again. You must read King Lear. But not the whole lot lah. Right, not Paul. Don't read the whole lot.
Yeah, I enjoy what you just said. I wish I had attended your class, but I didn't. Yeah, I wasn't.
Shakila will tell you. Shakila, Moses' wife, will tell you. She was my first year student.
Oh,
I taught the Great Gatsby. I taught the Great Gatsby in the class, and there were these two guys. Sorry, cousin, I'm diverting. There were these two people. They were quite interested in each other. You see, we had to have some fun in life. We can't be so serious, academic, and balancing binaries, all that. So there was this guy who was quite interested in this girl. So I noticed that, and I said, oh, We are going to dance Charleston. We don't know how to do it. Do you know how to do it? So I asked the couple to come up. And they did the Charleston. But unfortunately, the romance didn't last long. After the second year, they parted. No, literature is fun too. But coming back to your point, the one that has to do with the fact that the book is full of suffering, you have to give spaces for people to breathe. One thing came to my mind. You said that you love physiotherapy because it has a lot to do with face-to-face suffering of people and patients, stroke patients, dementia even. Yes, it is very, very hard. I have a friend's daughter who is doing that now. She's feeling the pressure. But in a sense, Paul, you haven't run away from that suffering. Because when you do these works of historical moments of suffering, you are still dealing with people who have gone through this. So the compassion is still there.
Mm.
Okay, she's Kasing, talking too long, Kasing.
No, I think you're right. I mean, like, I guess now you are not just working on suffering in a very technical way, right? You are actually researching it, you're getting deeper into it, you are writing about it. So it's a different relationship lah with that experience. I want to ask you, Paul, about like in the beginning when I knew you, you were kind of struggling to find a place in academia. Talk about the experience of being an adjunct, and those struggles in Malaysia.
Wow. I think even though I was struggling through, but then I'm quite lucky compared to many friends, in the sense that I was only jobless like for maybe not more than 2 years, and there are other people who until today they cannot find any job in the academia. So I was still lucky that I can still find a job as a fellow, even only for contract for 3 years first in UM, and then immediately I joined USM. So it wasn't too bad. It wasn't too bad for me. But of course, the very first 2-3 years after I got my PhD, I was willing to take up jobs that doesn't even match my qualification. For example, I work as just an RA, despite that I already have a PhD, RA for some research project, just for to pay bills. I need to pay bills, right? So I was willing to do that lah. But yeah, it was a very humbling process for me. I know the struggle of and those who are more junior than me, I think they are facing even more challenges than during my time. My time, it was already getting difficult. The job market, academic job market was really getting very difficult. But now it's even more difficult because the university expects you to already have at least 2 or 3 publications in IXI index journals in order to get just a contract job or just like a postdoctoral fellowship. But that wasn't like that. It wasn't like that during my time when I just graduated. I can still get a fellowship without having to get published in ISI. But of course, I did already have some publication, like in Scopus journals, but not so much in not in ISI index. Yeah, but compared to Singapore, the competition in Malaysia is like nothing lah. I understand the situation in Singapore is even.
I wouldn't say it's not like nothing. Tell us about the bigger context, right? Are Malaysian universities hiring Malaysian faculty? I mean, how bad is the problem of adjuncts?
Malaysia, we have the public higher education and the private higher education. To be frank, it's very difficult to. There are no social science department or even literary studies department in private higher education industry. They only have communication studies, which is very job specific because you can be a journalist, you can be a DJ, you can be a news presenter. So these are so-called occupation-based kind of like courses, which is related and relevant to social science, but they are not social science. So you would never find a course in philosophy or political science or even anthropology, sociology in private higher education
Oh, but
industry in
there
Malaysia.
there are those humanities and arts people, right, in the private universities.
Theatre studies, yes, over the last few years, over the last decade, a decade or two, there are theatre studies. For example, I believe in Taylor, INTI, I'm not too sure. New Era College, yes, New Era College, but it is in Mandarin, but for those in English, I think Taylor, they have theatre
Monash,
studies.
don't you have political scientists there?
Monash, yes,
Right.
yes,
Yes,
but
yes, yes.
Monash and Nottingham,
Right.
but the position is so few.
Mm.
There's just so few.
Okay.
So if we are talking about public universities, no places for almost very difficult for foreign scholars, and unless you are just doing a fellowship in public university or but in recent years, because of global ranking, part of the points you need to achieve points in hiring foreigners. That's going to the university, you will get more points. So now we see more and more contract academic staff who are foreigners in the public U, but they will never be able to get a permanent job because they are foreigners. Because to be a permanent academic staff in public U, you must become a civil servant, and only Malaysians can become civil servant. So that's why the situation is different from Singapore. Can foreigners get a tenure in the public university in Singapore?
Most of them do.
Yeah, so that's very different.
They
Yeah.
can.
Yeah, and they can get promoted as well, to
Very
leadership
good deal for
positions.
them. Yeah, very good
Yep.
deal in Singapore. But I think one of the problems, and this is something that I don't know whether I should say, is that there are many, many professors who are very, very productive still into old age. But there are also some who have, for some reason or another, decided that they are less, and maybe they have other things in their life that they want to do, fair enough. But they still want to remain in academia, and that doesn't give the younger folk a chance, I think. I think it is something that calls back to the honesty of the person. If you feel that you are better able to do things outside, or that you have come to a point in your life when you want to be, there's nothing wrong with that. Be more spiritual, be doing more spiritual work, or whatever else that calls you. Then vacate that spot so that someone younger can come in. Otherwise, the positions are all clogged up.
Yeah, they probably don't need that money
That's
either.
how I feel. That's how I feel. But then someone will say, you very easy, like you retired at 55.
But can I go back to the point of positionality that Khoon mentioned just now regarding, as a researcher, when you are meeting your interlocutor. Sorry to detract a bit, but I think that is very important for me, because it is a thing that I have been reflecting on. We try as best to be honest to our interlocutor, but how will that come to influence the dynamics is also something that really something that I've been thinking about as well. Will they say things that they think that we researcher want to hear? And then that is going to, completely, it has a lot of influence over the kind of stories that we are going to get. So how do we be honest, yet at the same time remain open, so that the interlocutor feel that they won't feel like uncomfortable telling us positions that they think that we might disagree with. So I think that is more important for me, to be as open as possible, so that the interlocutor are also willing to open up, including open up with some thoughts or ideas that we disagree with. And this also come up with the life after. There are views that I disagree. There are thoughts that I disagree. But then I still include the stories in, because that's life. That's that's diversities. Yeah. So people just have different views, different perspective, and we have to accept that as a reality. And we have to have confidence in conversation, that through conversation, through listening to different perspective, and different stories that we have some kind of like mutual understanding. I understand your position. I understand your views, even though I disagree with that. Yeah. So I think that is important for researcher and for public intellectuals, rather than shutting the conversation just because you say something that I disagree with.
Yeah. Good. You mentioned public intellectual. So I want to raise that question to both of you, right? What do you think about the role of Malaysian academics to take up a life as a public intellectual? So Khoon, you have done this for a while.
I think it's going to be harder and harder to do this because I think a lot depends on the shrinking of critical discourses in our society today. Sure, we now have a new government. They've only been there for about 8 months. I think Paul can correct me, or is it 9 months or something like that? Malaysia Madani. But then it's still very hard to be a public intellectual that is. You see, when you're a public intellectual, you'll inevitably be engaged in certain activities that might be deemed either sensitive or not very conducive to national unity or whatever you want to call it. But then again, it's still possible because if you work on a multiracial platform, there shouldn't be any quarrel. If you say, for example, some people, when they are social scientists, they don't only just do research. When they go to a group of people, say in a B40, I hate to use the word B40, I'm going to bring them out, chop them out, because there are other people who are also in dire straits. B40, I'll always say. But if they are living in certain places that you want to do interviews, you can still do something good for them practically. You can still sort of, some of them have no idea of how to do where to get pro bono legal help. Some of them don't even know where the food banks are, and some of them need. Some of them, their children do not know that there are free tuition classes. You can do that. You know, the Malaysia, betapa kecil budi pekerti masih ada jasanya. Meaning, however small your little act of charity, budi pekerti, you'll still have some weight. So when you say public intellectual, don't go and just do research. If you have little things that you can do for people, you can open up certain avenues of help for them, go ahead and do it. As for writing as a public intellectual of great critical insight and great honesty and sharp critique, some people have done that and have been had to pack their bags and go to our neighboring country. I won't mention who. Singapore. So I've done that and have gone there. Yeah. But I think it is, I don't know, maybe it's also good just to be able to help people practically, even if you can't write very critically because of certain constraints of power, of the powerful. You still can do something to help people. You know, when you do the interview, there are little things you can sort of help people with that they may not know because some of them are not so knowledgeable. Pro bono legal work, whereas little, where they can get some things, little practical acts of budi pekerti, we call it budi pekerti. Betapa kecil budi pekerti, masih ada jasanya. However small, you still have something. The other thing I would like to emphasize, although it sounds like I'm going back to the national narrative of nation, is that we must all be fluent in Bahasa. We have to be fluent in Bahasa because it is our national language. We have to be fluent in English, and also we have to learn Chinese if we can, or even the vernaculars. But not knowing Bahasa is a disadvantage to many of us. And for me, it has never been a problem right from standard 6 because I like the language, but also it's like, you know, you want to know Bahasa. You want to be able to publish in Bahasa too. You know, I don't know how you feel about that, Paul.
No, it is made just this year. It's made a part of the KPI that we need to produce writings, not necessarily in journal, but writings even for public readership to be at least in BM, which I think is good. Even without that KPI, I was thinking of writing in BM as well. I think I have to pieces of stories written in BM, published by Pusat Sejarah Rakyat, I think last year or 2 years ago, about two activists in the 60s. But I don't know how many people read that book. It's about, I forgot about the title of the book, but it is published by Pusat Sejarah Rakyat. Yeah.
Just a small comment. Sometimes when I say this, I do get certain people, even colleagues, saying that it's almost as if they say that, why do you want to spend so much time on Bahasa? And when I used to be on the National Literary Awards, it's like, why you go there? It's so national. And, the certain writers who are more critical won't be selected as the Sastrawan Negara, who's our national laureate. I didn't feel that I shouldn't be there. Boon Kheng used to be there. Then after that, Christian Jit used to be there. Then I was selected to be on. Because I feel that I'm living here. I'm a citizen of this place. Whether I like it or not, I have to master the language in some degree of competency.
Yeah. Sometimes people get labeled as well because of doing that. That you're writing in a certain language, then you get labeled.
I've been labeled by a lot of people, even the people in Aliran long ago.
What do you get labeled as?
Like, this Dewan Bahasa, they're all so centralized, the statutory body, and all the writers they select are all not very critical. They've forgotten Sharun Ahmad was selected. What's the point? Why you sit there? You want to put it on your CV? I don't even bother to answer. I don't even bother to answer.
So, Khoon, I was struck just now when you mentioned Operation Lalang, right? So, as someone who's kind of involved, right, in NGOs and all that, in Singapore, for example, in Operation Spectrum around the same time, right, as Lalang, is often seen to have a chilling effect on the civil society in Singapore. Have you ever, as a public intellectual, felt that kind of chill?
Not really. I think one of the reasons, I have to be honest, is that I was not then on the executive committee. I wasn't really a major part of Aliran. I was just a sort of a member, a new member. And also because Aliran is not one of those groups that they felt were extraordinarily threatening. It's not a political party. It's on the UN roster of NGOs. So there wasn't that sense. But nonetheless, as I did write in my article in Beng Lan's book, on the night of when we heard that Chandra was arrested, I think it was one of the Aliran members who came and took me to the main officer to write letters of appeal. There was a sense of some kind of fear because we didn't know what else would happen, in the sense that, not so much to myself personally, but to Chandra. We don't know what happened to people inside during that few days or that few 1 week, or for some people even longer than 1 week. There's always a sense when power sends out its claws in concrete, brutalizing moments like this. I think there is always a chill. There is always a slight chill. The image is that of a predator with claws. Yeah, there will always be that.
Now, it brings the conversation just now brings back a memory of mine when I was teaching in Utah, University of Tunku Abdul Rahman. It is a political party run university. It's considered private university, but it is actually run by MCA. So it is owned and run by MCA. Back then, I used to teach in that college, in that university from 2009 to 2011 or 12, something like over 2 to 3 years. And during that time, it was already post 2008. That means there were power transition in Penang and in Selangor already. But then PN was responding with a lot of a very authoritarian measure against the opening up. People were organizing Brase, people were organizing anti-ISA rally. I remember when I was teaching in that university, there was this anti-ISA rally, and also Brase. And then we received letter actually from the university because MCA back then was a ruling party. So we received a a letter that warned against participation in these rallies. So and I have students coming up to me asking me, they kind of like they are attracted to the rally. They wanted to take part, but then they are unsure whether they should or not. So and it was actually quite difficult for me because I don't know whether the students, not purposely, but they may tell people that, oh, you see, Paul, back then I didn't have PhD yet. So Miss Paul would, Miss Paul asked us to join the rally. I don't want that to happen. So, so I went there myself without telling my students, but then I saw some of them there. Yeah, and that was a very interesting moment. So they know my position without me telling them, but then they saw me in the rally, and then they know lah. But the experience of teaching in another community college is very different. That was New Era College, which is run by, all the courses were conducted in Mandarin. And when I was teaching in that community college, I brought students to the rally, no problem at all, because it wasn't controlled by any political party. I brought them to make videos, to make a documentary of the rally. Several, I remember there was this fuel hike, the petrol price went up, and then so we had a rally against that policy, and several other street demonstrations. Yeah.
So what happened? I mean, in your case, so nothing.
Nothing happened.
Yeah.
Nothing happened. Yeah. And I think when I was teaching in Utah, I was also a student of USM. We also we were expected to sign Akujanji. So based on that Akujanji, I was not supposed to participate in any rally.
Explain that. What is that? Is some kind of agreement?
Yeah, it's an agreement between you and the university that you need to do a pledge that you will never take part in any anti-government kind of like activities. Cannot be critical about the state, the government, and so on and so forth. Yeah.
Yeah. Your mention of Utah, right, actually strokes a memory in my mind. So in 2010, I think I organized an oral history in Southeast Asia conference. One of the participants was a Malaysian scholar, actually from Utah, a junior scholar.
Kayen. Leong Kayen.
No, not him.
No?
I mean, I remember him, Kayen, but he was not in Utah at the time. This other scholar, right? He presented something. I can't remember actually the topic very clearly. And afterwards, right, he said he's leaving. He had to leave Utah.
I think it's Kayen, Batang Kali about, no?
No, I don't think it's him. Because that one got published in the... Because this person's paper, right, he withdrew it.
Oh.
Yeah. So, I guess that's right? Public universities, there is a line that you got to be careful about.
Yeah.
I guess this would be even a bigger concern, right, for adjuncts and those who are not tenured.
Oh, I'm thinking the other way.
Yeah.
If you are adjunct, you are free to say whatever you want. But if you
Of course, you're free to say. You're always free to say. It's just the consequences, right?
The consequences. Yeah. I don't know. Because as adjunct, you have nothing to lose. But once you are a public servant, then you may face the consequences.
Does that happen in Malaysia? That you know of, right?
I think most people told their line. Most people told their line. I don't know about Khoon's time. I think there were several cases.
I think there were, but without mentioning names, I would say that the censure can come in very subtle ways. It's not like they will say that, okay, we are terminating your service, or that they will say something like, you have to call to somebody's office to answer or something like that. But it could come in very, very subtle ways, like promotion denied,
yes,
or grants that it is very, when power is there, it will create among our colleagues people who are very obedient and very scared. So because you've done a little something, these people won't invite you to join their fund, what we call it, their research cluster anymore. So it's kind of a subtle cunning. Okay, so that can happen. It can happen. It can happen with people who are like, I don't know what to say lah, part-bodied or not so brave. But the people who are brave, and they're, USM during my time had some wonderful people, really wonderful people. Yeah. They won't care. They will say, okay, we got the grant. It is for a foreign grant. We just invite whoever we want. And most of the time, power, let us not forget, also has a cowardice, has a face of cowardice, a mask of cowardice, isn't it? Because they also have to have discretion of some sorts if they want to prolong their power. So they wouldn't say, hey, sorry, you cannot have that fellow. They wouldn't. It's just
Would
that,
they not just deny it or reject it altogether?
hey, foreign grant, no. And the university can get a credit for that. No, you can get your upgrading. All these things. They will say, oh, tak apalah, Safis has got a workshop. Safis is giving your grant, or some Holland fellow is giving, somebody from Holland is giving you a grant, or somebody Sumitomo is giving you a grant, or go, wow, they will not do anything.
Yeah.
Because it is to the glory of the university. And most of the people, unfortunately, in USN during my time, I don't know about now, who are like this, who are able to get foreign grants, are very strong people. They don't care. Also brilliant scholars. So with that kind of, what you call that, what we call armor, why should they care? But of course, if they for long run, they also have to kowtow a bit, because otherwise you can't get any position. You can't get to be a dean if you don't kowtow a bit, or at least not kowtow, but at least show that you're not going to be a rebel without a cause to the universities without cause. So, but and they have been good years in USM. I don't know about now. I just don't want you to feel that the public universities are all horrible. They're very good people. You just need time to toss them up. You just need time to sense them up. And you just need time to be able to, what word can I say? Allow people to open up. You know how Asian culture is? Certain groups of people are very quiet. I know of a few of our colleagues, Boon Kheng knows them too. They did very good work, but they're very quiet. So he has a way of drawing them out. I certainly don't have a way of drawing out because I talk too much, and the poor guy who's quiet doesn't have anything to say anymore. so there is time for you. You just need to have time to look for people, to see who people are. But of course, in all scenario, we have to be very careful, because you don't want to jeopardize anything.
So Khoon.
Adjuncts also suffer. Adjuncts will suffer also, Paul, because you know what? It won't be. It can be not renewed at all. Maybe 1 year. That's all.
But in USA, we hardly have any adjunct. Public university, they hardly hire part-time lecturer.
They don't have the funds. They don't have the funds. They don't have the funds. They don't have the funds.
Okay. It's a different situation, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
But private universities, yes, they do hire a lot of adjunct because that saves a lot of money.
So do the public universities have a lot of like contracted or non-tenure academics?
Over the last few years, it's getting more and more common.
Right. Okay. So Khoon, you mentioned Boon Kheng a few times, right? I mean, I love his work. Could you maybe say something about him from your own friendship?
Boon Kheng is a very reticent, private person. So I happen to know the wife more. But he is very willing to share. If you asked him about history, if you asked him about Mat Kilau, if you asked him about the emergency, which is his forte, he's very willing to share. But we do have a little bit of disagreement where history and literature are concerned. I do remember telling him that I was going to write on Pramodia in Bahasa about this tetralogy, Pramodia Minka, and then all that. And of course, it's very, very well translated by Max Brod into English. Then he said, oh, I see. But then, you have to be very, history, we have to have some records and all that. Sort of like the empiricist, the record, the colonial record part of him is still very important. Although whatever British record, is it that British, whatever place, the place where everybody goes to who's a historian. So he says you have to have that. You cannot just have not that. So, of course, Eileen was just smiling. She didn't know. And she was just sort of supporting me and saying, oh, but sometimes you have the imaginative history too. So that is the only thing. But he was
Mm.
very supportive of a lot of people. He was also very kind to one of our colleagues who's a very good scholar. He came from National University. This one I can mention. His pastor, wonderful man, Dr. Sundralingam, first class in National University during a time of Wong Gang-woo. Wong Gang-woo knows him too. But he was a more silent man. But he obviously very much more silent than Boon King. But Boon King had the ability to get through to him, and they shared a lot of, I believe, curry lunches. So there is that. I don't look at an academic or anybody just by seeing how much they've done or whatever. I see what is a kindness done to somebody who's a silent, rather sort of like, should I use the word lonely, a solitary colleague. Wong King did that. That was a mark of his humanity, because very few people would have done that. Obviously, the man must have been quite a difficult person in some ways, but he did. So that is a mark of his humanity. But literature and history, he said, very careful. Must go to the British Record Office, this office, look at this.
Yeah, I can imagine that. Okay, last question. In the beginning, we talked about this culture of reading, right? And the younger generation today, with their social media, they are reading a lot less. Um, how has your experience been in terms of trying to encourage, young Malaysian students, as well as maybe faculty, to read history, to read literature? Are you hopeful about their reading?
I've been out of touch with academia for a long time, even with young colleagues, except for the few that I meet in Aleran and all that. But I do still teach O levels and A levels literature, because I enjoy it very much. And of course, I wouldn't be dishonest and say that the money doesn't help now. Of course, the money helps so that I can go more to coffee bean, tea leaf, all the bourgeois coffee joints. The thing is that I find that with most of these people, you cannot discount IT and ebooks. There's no point telling them, hey, go and buy that. So whatever is free, if they want to read it, I do allow that. So I'm not totally discouraged by the young, that the young are not reading. It's just that reading from ebooks, they still do. The kind of reading is what I worry about. Like at the moment, I have one who loves Hunger Games, Suzanne Collins' Hunger Games, which I personally, I'm not saying it's bad. I don't want to stop him because he enjoys it so much. He wants to buy all the series. But I had to steer him away from that to not Macbeth. Don't worry, Kaching, not Macbeth. I mean, Kasing. What am I have a friend called Kaching. Kasing, not Macbeth. But at least steer him away to read Robert Frost, The Road Not Taken. The fact that people are still willing to read, even electronic or otherwise, is still something. And do you know that MPH recorded a surge in sales of certain books? Not IT books, a surge in sale of books that have to do with like fantasies, never mind, they can still read, or robots, the robotics, the kind of thing, that kind of, what do you call that? Those things that can transform into various things. People are still reading. But what of the classics? Are there? I'm a little bit discouraged. What about David Copperfield? What about all those old books that Paul Graves' Golden Treasury, which I enjoyed? The accusation would be you're still trying to be a British colonial relic. But what about the joy in all of these old books? Very slow. They say very slow. David Copperfield, the orphan boy, I don't care what he did, how he got very poor, he had no money, then he took out his hand and said, more, please. They don't care. They want something fast, action-oriented. Because you know why? Computer games. I hate computer games.
What? I play computer games all the time.
Sorry, so I cannot stand it. In fact,
Hate,
I told the
such
boy,
a strong word.
yes, Auntie here never uses
Why?
words. Here is very bad. I'm using not grey words. No, because computer games tend to make them want to have instant solutions. Somebody must be slain quite fast. Somebody must be killed quite fast. But they don't want to go slow to read. They don't want to see the hidden 2/3 of the iceberg. They're only staying with the monsters on the one third. This saddens me. This saddens me tremendously. But the mom says, I can't stop him. And the girl I told you who says, half an hour is enough reading for me. She's into Latin dancing, for which she's the champion for the whole of Malaysia. And she's only 40 years old. Latin dance, And for that, she can practice for hours on end. But reading, half an hour enough, she told me. So today, there's too much activity. Too much activity, Abhikasit. The thing that I'm sad about is that the old canonical works, which I know would sound very colonial, are still important. Still important. But why are they not read anymore? Or even something from Guyana. Nobody wants to read. Or something from Africa. Nobody wants to read. Or Malaysia, even Shirley Lim, or even today, Keith Tuan Chai, nobody wants to read. Or any other fellow. Rahman Rashid. Have you read Rahman Rashid? You should read. Wonderful essays. Passed away already.
You know, you can do a series of TikTok videos.
I don't like TikTok.
You have...
You know what? I tell you, there's one TikTok of Gaza. This girl is supposed to be speaking for the Gazans, but she's got her long nails all highly manicured. I told Musa, please don't send me that. And then she's wearing a very revealing dress with her hair all done up nicely. And then she said, please, you all support Gaza. So ridiculous. She's dressed like a top model and she's wearing a very revealing baju and dress. And she says, I'm talking about Gaza. Please. It is TikTok that has... Sorry lah, can't.
No lah, you got the voice for it, you got the personality, you got the emotions and passion. You'll be wonderful.
I don't want. TikTok is so terribly full of ticks and no talk.
So far.
So
you can change that.
I already told Musa, please don't send me any more TikToks. I don't know. All these TikToks, tolong. I told I don't send me TikToks. That's why I left the Aliran chat.
See, Aliran also embrace it.
One video of monkeys and all that. Oh, please. I cannot stand it. Sorry. This is an older lady speaking. So for your IG and TikTok will be very good. It is very good.
Yeah.
Sometimes it is very useful, but please come on. Thank you.
I'm the old school as well.
Okay, Paul. What is your
I'm
view?
the old school.
Yeah.
I am the old school. I also cannot deal with TikTok. I usually just ignore whatever TikTok that is sent through my WhatsApp. I'll just ignore it. And I'm so much more pessimistic than Khoon in regards to the reading culture or the reading habits among the younger generation today, because based on my teaching experience nowadays, even though USM has a library, but people just don't get in there. When they get in there, it's actually for the aircon. And because, and only from what I can see, usually in a class, if you can meet one or two students who are into reading, then you should be very happy. You should feel happy already. Usually there are people who still enjoy reading and they do read a lot and widely, but the percentage is very low. Perhaps in a class of 30, 40 students, maybe only one or two, or even the most, perhaps not more than 5 students. 5 is a lot already. Perhaps only two or three students. And but not to blame them. I think the way the courses are structured in our universities these days is the same for private or public universities. There are just too many subjects, which I think students just don't have time to really read, because you imagine one subject expects them to submit 2 or 3 assignments per semester. If they are taking 6 or 7 subjects, how many assignments they have to do? And so I think we also have to reflect on the way we structure their the training and the courses. I think it's better to go in depth rather than touches everything just on the surface. And from this perspective, I don't think we could blame students. It's not their fault. But in my own class, I have done some experiment, like trying to get them to read. But they usually complain about English. But even when I turn into Malay text, they still have difficulty. So it shows that it's not about language. It's about getting, familiarize yourself with concepts and ideas, which is something they are not familiar with, because the rote learning in secondary school is just so pervasive, and then they cannot, they are still they cannot get rid of that kind of learning. It's going to take a long time to really unlearn that kind of rote learning, and to become a more engaged kind of like close reading, reading the text closely so that you can understand what you are reading, which I don't think I can change that just in my own class, because there are so many subjects out there. And that is the challenge. So as a kind of like, but I still stick to this idea of trying to cultivate critical thinking. So critical thinking can be cultivated without just forcing students to read.
Yep.
So I try to engage with like using not TikTok but documentary, maybe for 20 minutes or like 40-50 minutes. Get them to watch a documentary and then talk about the documentary, what they have seen in the documentary, and then have discussion on the documentary and so on and so forth. So this is what I try to do, because even observation is a skill that I find that it's a skill that for those who are used to rote learning, they are not used to observing things, observing the society, observing human behaviors, and so on and so forth. Yeah.
Does it work better? Documentaries?
I think it works good for my class. At least they are exposed to certain issues which I think relevant and significant.
Because they actually watch it in real time, right? And then they respond to it.
I will give them the link. They don't have to watch it real time. They can watch it anytime, but they need to come up with a presentation based on the documentary. And then they're expected to ask questions. Yeah, so they would be exposed to a lot of contemporary issues, which I think important for social scientists. Yeah.
So do they still read the text as a supplement, or did you just forgo the text completely?
It depends on subject. Yeah. I'm teaching a subject called like theory and method. And for theory and method, I do force them to read a little bit, but still very difficult, really. Some, they can just read 1 or 2 pages and then they give up. But at least they read the 1 and 2 pages. Yeah. So I think this is really challenging. And now with all these apps, technology, it really done a lot of damages to teaching. For example, in the past, whatever we want to cite, we must at least read that book in order, or that article in order to cite, right? Now there is app that helps you to do citation without going through the text, which is really bad. And so you have students, they can write an essay with a long list of references without reading. They haven't read anything. Yeah. Now I have talked to, having conversation with colleagues, telling them that when it comes to like Viva or whatever, we must make sure that we ask students, okay, in your list of reference, you have referenced this author or that author. What do you think about that author? What did that author write about? Then if they couldn't answer, that means they have never read that book.
Yeah. I think your documentary method is an excellent one, and again, it shows that you are trying to, not just do the usual practice and follow other academics citing readings as you did, right, with the oral history book. I'm quite sympathetic to the students in this sense. Increasingly many of these academic texts that are used as readings, they are not written with the students in mind, right? They are written for other academics to read, and it's a very closed circle, right? So even if you take away the language, it's not just about the language or the jargon. It's that these books are not speaking to students in the first place. They are speaking to other academics. So I completely understand if So how do we solve this, right? One way is, of course, you use other kind of media, other kinds of readings, lah, right, to provoke and to stimulate. The other way is that the academics must change what they write. You know, they must write with students in mind. There must be specialized textbooks for this, right? And so I think it's a good idea if academics can come together and say, you know, for this course that we are doing, we want to put up a special textbook that actually guides the students through. I mean, if you look at the school curriculum, right? I think in Malaysia probably as well, they are increasingly, right, to get students to think in a certain way, to go through the material in a certain way. They are very helpful in that sense. And not just, all right, you read this and then you come to class and talk about it. You know, so I think that there is probably a way that that academics can write something that has more with the students in mind.
Yeah, the idea of textbook, I think that is very good suggestion. But sadly, with all these KPI, I think
time, resources. That's a huge thing. I mean, it must make money, right? The textbooks must sell. It can't be a free textbook, right? They must be sold in a way then that justifies the time.
Yeah.
But I think there needs to be a balance. There needs to be a balance so that when you are writing a textbook for university students, I think you must be aware that the guidance level or the sort of like structures need not and should not be the same as for secondary schools. I think there must be a balance, because otherwise there is the risk of simplification. It is always difficult to effect a balance in life, right? You want to guide the students, but you also don't want to oversimplify. Because they're at the level of tertiary level. You don't want to write in such a way that it like obfuscates like some of the theories, but you also don't want it to be so simple. You want it to be able to stimulate some thought. Otherwise, the age-old word of spoon feeding can come in.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But you know, nowadays,
but your point is well taken.
Yeah.
Your point is well taken. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, like inquiry-based, like open-ended, rather than, you know, giving information, right? I mean, I would just wanted to say that in Singapore schools, right, the school textbooks have actually become very sophisticated, very, very challenging.
I see.
Yeah, quite crazy, actually. I think they're over-teaching. Yeah. Anyway, it's been a great almost 2 hours. I'm just wondering, what should the title of this podcast be?
Oh, I'm hopeless with titles. I'm hopeless with titles of all sorts, honorifics and titles. No way. You better ask Paul.
Paul?
I don't know.
We must arrange some kind of person-to-person meetup.
Yes.
Right? Yeah. Okay, so I will get ready to go down to.
You better go.
Makan.
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay, enjoy
bye.
your lunch. Yeah, bye.
Thank you both for sharing. All right, it's been a wonderful chat.
Thanks for having us. Yeah.
Yeah, thanks for having us. Yeah.
Bye.
Bye.